14, of all places, a church revival. And immediately began to serve the Lord and share God's love and grace with others. She's married to Johnny Askew, and she has 3 children. Brianna, forever 19, Joshua, now 19, and Ileana, 15. Her oldest daughter, Brianna, went home to be with the Lord in December 2016. Kristie worked as a church secretary for 15 years. She has served as a children's and youth ministry director, vacation Bible school director, and a lay pastor at Thousand Trails Campground. Kristie received her Bachelor of Science in Religion from Liberty University in 2012. She's answered the call to ministry as a pastor in 2015, and she received her license for pastoral ministry in 2018. This past May, she received her Master of Divinity at the School of Theology at Virginia Union University. Praise God. Kristie has a passion for sharing the love of God with children of all ages and with the homeless. She currently volunteers her time at Petsworth Elementary School to facilitate the Mom's Breakfast, where she offers encouragement and parenting tips. She is a founding member of GUEST, it's an acronym, Gloucester United Emergency Shelter Team, a founder member, wow. The local homeless shelter. And as of October 1st, she is the new executive director. Woo! And Kristie also serves as the pastor of Shackelford's Chapel United Methodist Church in King and Queen County. So with no further ado, may I present our sister Kristie to you. And in all Kristie fashion, I have to present her with the sunflower. I think she knows what that's for. There you go. Shoes.
Tonight, I was asked to share with you my testimony. I've had a lot of things happen in my life that I could share with you. But tonight, I was asked specifically to share with you my testimony about the tragedy that my family experienced with the loss of my oldest daughter, Brianna, and how God's grace was evident through the whole ordeal and still today.
Amen.
You'll have to bear with me. It's a tough story. It was Christmas Day, 2016, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My husband and I, my 2 youngest children, loaded up the car with Christmas dinner fixings and desserts, Christmas gifts to give to our family. And we headed out to my aunt and uncle's house in King and Queen County to gather with the rest of our family that afternoon. Brianna was not with us quite yet. She had spent the night at her father's house up in Prince George County, but she was on her way home to join us. It was supposed to be an exciting day as we celebrated the birth of our Savior. And a joyous day just being together with family. However, that joy and excitement quickly changed as we were on the road to my aunt and uncle's house. We drove up in front of Shackelford's Chapel to turn onto Jonestown Road, just right in front of it, and traffic was stopped. We could see that there was a horrible car accident right there. All we could see was a ball of metal on the side of the road. I immediately prayed that whoever was in that accident was okay. As I normally do driving down the road and see an accident, a deputy approached us. He was turning all the cars around to go back out to 17 so we could detour through Saluda. But I just needed to get to that road right there. So I asked him, and if you know anything about Shackelford's Chapel and where it sits, it's on Route 14 up at Adner, heading towards West Point. It sits on a very sharp curve, and it has a cemetery across the street. So I asked the deputy if we could go through the cemetery to get to that side road that I needed to get to. And the officer allowed us. As we drove through that cemetery, I continued looking. I wasn't driving, but I continued looking over at this accident scene. When we were about to turn onto Jonestown Road, I could see the back of the car that first looked like this ball of metal. I was still too far away to see the license plate very well, but it looked like the back of Brianna's car. And this rock just sunk in my gut. You might call it mother's intuition. I stared even harder at the back of that car, trying to make out the license plate. And it looked familiar, but I still wasn't sure. I still couldn't make it out very well. I wear glasses. But the spacings of the letter wasn't a regular plate. You could tell it was a special license plate, which Brianna also had. So I jumped out of the car door and I started walking closer to the accident scene. As I started walking closer, I could see that it was Brianna's license plate. It was her car. My walk quickly turned into a run because I was hoping I would find her there so I could comfort her. I felt, though, like I was outside of my body, just watching this nightmare unfold. I got to the car, to the driver's door that wasn't even on the car, and she wasn't there. I couldn't find her at all. It seemed like no one was there, even though there were officers around. I think they were still diverting traffic or dealing with other things. I don't even know what they were doing. I just felt like there was no one there. I remember walking back to the road, and I just fell to my knees. I started praying right there. I didn't know what had happened, how bad anything was, what the outcome would be, but I just prayed for God to protect my daughter and to help us. And in that moment, God surrounded me with his peace. I can't even really explain it, but I know it was his peace. A deputy finally approached me, and I told him I was the mother of the girl driving this car. And I asked where she was. I didn't care what had happened. I know there was another car involved. I just wanted to get to my daughter, to be with her. And he said, "You need to go to the hospital right now." So that's what I did. I ran back to the car. I told my family that it was Brianna. We turned our car around. We tried to call all of our other family that was meeting for the Christmas gathering so that they could meet us at the hospital. When we got to Walter Reed Hospital, we were sent to a waiting room while they were still stabilizing her. We found out that they were actually preparing to airlift her to another hospital. But they let us see her for just a moment, and all the family that was there at that time was able to go in her room and pray over her and talk to her and tell her that we were there. She was completely unresponsive. had many medical concerns and broken bones, in addition to severe brain trauma. We watched her as she was airlifted in the helicopter to the next hospital. We quickly got on the road ourselves and followed. Once we got to the hospital, she was already in surgery. And even more family from Prince George, along with her best friends and their families, her co-workers, and even her boss came to the hospital on Christmas Day. We remained there at the hospital for a week before she was declared brain dead, and we had to make some difficult decisions. But over the course of that week, God worked in amazing ways, and He showed me His love and grace in ways I had never seen before. First of all, just driving upon that accident, I believe, was a miracle itself. Because if I had been a few minutes earlier and not seen that accident already at my family's house, we might not have even known it had happened until much, much later that night. Then we saw God's love extended through all of Brianna's friends and co-workers and her employer, joining us and waiting with us into the long hours of Christmas night. Who would give up their family time and celebration to go and sit at the hospital on Christmas night? They chose to do that. They chose to love on us. God's grace, a special undeserved gift, was given the next morning to our family. We had all ran home after she had had her surgery and was settled into her room so we could get clothes and come back and sit with her as long as we needed to. But when we were at the house, we got a call that her blood pressure was unstable and they didn't know if she was going to make it. So we hurried back to the hospital. When I walked in that room, I started talking to her and I started singing to her. She immediately settled down and her blood pressure stabilized. I knew in that moment she could hear my voice, and God had given me that time to speak to her, to share with her Bible verses, sing some of our favorite songs and hymns. I actually took my Bible and my hymn book the week we were there. But we were given a chance to share last words of love that we needed to share. Not everyone gets that chance. God's mercy was also shown through the opportunity to share her story on the news. One of the local stations called and asked if they could interview us. And it was a little awkward, but her father and I decided that we would do it because we wanted to ask everyone to pray for her, to pray for a miraculous healing. And people reached out to us from all around the world, Japan, Africa, that heard her story. People realized that they needed to get right with God. They needed to start praying for themselves and their own families. But during the interview, the reporter asked me if I wanted to say anything to the other driver. I hadn't really thought about it, but all I could say is that I was not angry at her. It was an accident. I don't know that many mothers could feel that way immediately, but I didn't have any anger. I didn't feel a need to forgive the other driver because I didn't feel she had done anything wrong. It was an accident. She didn't purposefully set out to go and cause this accident. Then God would work in other miraculous ways within our family as we gathered each day. He worked on hardened hearts, broken hearts, bitter hearts. There were people in our family that hated each other. They would not talk to each other. And it had been like this because of mistakes that had happened over 30 years ago.
Yep.
It's a long time to have hate and bitterness in your hearts. But God mended their hearts. He mended those relationships.
Hallelujah.
Forgiveness was extended, and they learned to love again.
Yeah. Hallelujah.
That is one of the most beautiful things that I saw that week. As we came toward the end of the week, Brianna was still unresponsive. We were waiting the results of her last brain scan. We were faced with the decision of taking Brianna off of life support, and we're being asked to consider organ donation so that we could give others the gift of life. Up until that last minute, we continued to pray for God's will to be done, whether that be a miraculous healing or taking Brianna home to glory. While we were waiting for these results, we were approached by all of her friends. They wanted to hold a prayer vigil for everyone to continue praying for her healing. We agreed, and we set it up with the hospital for New Year's Eve at 5 o'clock. Later that afternoon, we received the results of the brain scan. We knew now what we were really facing, and we agreed to meet with the organ donation team to make the arrangements. The care team was wonderful. They understood how difficult that decision was, but they began making arrangements to find recipients of the organs as soon as possible. Once everything was arranged, they would reach out to us and let us know what time the surgery would take place. When the care team came to us and told us the surgery was scheduled for New Year's Eve at 5 o'clock, we knew God was in control. It was the exact time for the prayer vigil. God knew what He was doing. You see, instead of us having to sit in a cold, sterile waiting room, thinking about surgery, waiting for someone to come in and tell us that she was gone, God instead surrounded us with His love, the body of Christ, each of you, the church. Hundreds of people gathered around us, prayed with us, sang praise and worship songs with us, hugged us, showed us that we were not alone. God was with us because they were with us. This was one of the worst experiences, the worst experience I've ever had to endure. And I have suffered trials my life. I have experienced sexual abuse as a child. I experienced a father who abandoned our home due to drugs and addiction. I endured domestic violence in a marriage, but nothing compares to this. I tell you this story in the hopes that you would see God was still present, even in a dark time.
Amen.
His grace, His mercy was there.
Hallelujah.
Whatever difficult times you might be experiencing, it can feel like your worst nightmare and it's not ever going to get better. But there's nothing you can go through that would separate you from God's love.
That's right.
We often ask ourselves, why? I never asked God why. I just trusted Him along this way. We don't always get an answer, though, when we ask why, and it is okay to ask why. But I just trusted Him to walk with me because I knew He was present with me. My daughter's favorite Bible verse was Romans 8:18. Little did we know that that verse would impact all of our family. But it reads like this: I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. And I pray that if you are struggling tonight with anything, that you will keep your eyes on Jesus.
That's right. Yeah.
Look for his glory,
Yes.
even in the dark times.
Yes.
And I give God all the praise and glory for walking with me through this whole tragedy. I want to share two quick things because even though it happened almost 3 years ago, things still happen today that are a part of this story. One is how I became a pastor at Shackelford's Chapel, the spot where the accident happened. I'm a pastor in the United Methodist Church. If you know anything about the Methodist Church, you're sent by a bishop and their cabinet. They make the decision by your gifts and graces of where you're going to serve. And I got a phone call one day, and it was my very first appointment as a pastor. It was in April, just after Brianna had passed. And they said, we have a question. We have a place that we think would be a good fit for you. They said, would you be willing to go and speak to the people at Shackelford's Chapel?
Only God.
My bishop works out of Richmond. They didn't know anything about the accident in front of Shackelford's Chapel. But God knew. And he placed me there for a reason. To heal me and to heal the people that I work with and minister with. And then another special thing is that the lady that drove the other vehicle, Miss Peggy, who's already gone on to glory, is a precious, precious child of God too. And her family were members of Shackelford's Chapel. Recently, Miss Peggy's brother lost his daughter. It was back in August. The first person that they called was me because they knew that I had experienced the loss of a daughter. They knew that I understood the difficulties, but they saw God's work in the whole situation. And God allowed me to minister to this family in need. But most importantly, I tell this story because we need to remember that we do not know the day or the hour that God will call us home or that we will leave this earth.
That's right.
Thankfully, Brianna had made the decision many years ago to follow Jesus.
Amen.
And our family is greatly comforted knowing that she is in the presence of the Lord. But it is just as important for each of us here tonight, for all of our families and friends that are not here with us, to know Jesus is Lord before it's too late. Because we could go on this road tonight when we leave here, and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to wake up in the morning. We don't know what's going to happen this Christmas Day. God knows, but we need to have our hearts right with God, and we need to know Jesus is Lord.